Ciao. Good afternoon. Today I wanted to discuss um, this new theory I have that art, within the context of this society, I think it's the only honest pursuit that exists. And I want to try to explain some of my reasoning for why I think art is not only the most honest pursuit that one could pursue, but it was also, actually, in my opinion, and it's biased opinion, it's superior to almost all other pursuits. So now, of course, first of all, let's get this out of the way. When I talk about art, I mean any of the mediums. So I mean working within the theater, I mean painting, I mean writing, I mean making music, or doing even comedy, I would consider an art. Of course, acting, so on and so forth. Now, why do I think that this is the most honest pursuit? Well, a lot of people, when it comes to art, will try to make some comparisons with some other things that exist. Namely, the biggest one they'll make is they'll talk about how they think that sports or something like that compare to art or athletics of some type. Or or of course some certain skills. Say being a doctor, of course, is a pretty important skill, so a lot of people will compare that to being an artist. But what we're kind of seeing more and more, and working class people often will say the doctor is this very high thing that no one can ever get above. But what we're actually finding, especially as the age of automation keeps going on further and further, and we start to have more robotic work done and everything, is we're finding that actually even many doctor tasks are being replaced by bots. And the second you get something replaced by a bot, you kind of basically know that it's the soul has been lost. And art though is never, we don't really see that happening with art. For instance, we have seen an infiltration of bots within the art realm in a certain way, because we have seen, for example, drummers kind of got knocked out by bots in terms of a lot of music, but we still haven't seen the voice of the artist get knocked out. So a lot of the instrumentation has indeed been knocked out, but you never see the voice of the artist really get knocked out, you know what I'm saying? And that's kind of what I wanted to go on. So why is art the most honest pursuit? Well, one thing I noticed about a lot of my friends, when I think about my friends and the lives they've lived and the lives they've chosen to live, and how they've changed since they were kids or late teenagers, or even from their early 20s to what they are now, when we're almost 30, and some of them are even like 40s, is that a lot of them uh, went on this big thing where they tried to show you that they were going to they changed their lives in this big way, and they became something like, for example, they start doing all these workouts, and they buy this big car, and they have kids, and they mm, I don't know, they buy this big house or something like that, and they say, well, look, my life has changed so much, I've done so much, look at all this shit I got. So I'm not an artist and I'm not anything like that, but look at all this fucking stuff I got. Isn't it great? Look at how much I'm doing. But I think all that stuff is fundamentally dishonest, and I don't think it really changes life, and I don't think it really changes happiness. I also don't think it builds on top of the other thing. For example, art, if you make art, always builds on top of itself. For example, if you're a great sports player, you might play for 15 years, and you will get better over the course of time. But eventually you hit a peak, and then you start to roll back, and actually it gets to the point usually where most sports players have to actually retire and no longer could even play their sport by the time they're 30 or 40. And then what do they usually do? Well, maybe if they're lucky, they'll become an announcer, but most often I think they just literally quit the sport, and maybe they have millions of dollars. That's true, some of them, but they can't participate in their sport anymore. So that doesn't build on top of one another. And this would also go for the weightlifting guys and all this. It doesn't build on top of one another. So it hits a peak, and then you stop, and then you just kind of have this point where you look back and you say, I used to do weightlifting, but I don't do it anymore. Now, you might think that that's the same for the artist, that the artist eventually hits a peak and then he rolls back. But what actually happens is art does actually build on top of one another, because especially if it's an art, of course, that you can record in some sense, because you say, well, I had 10 pictures I painted in 1999. By 2009, I have 500 pictures that I've painted in my archives. And by 2019, if you're still alive, now you have 3,000 pictures you painted in your archives, and you've also branched out into audio recordings. You've also branched out into all these other things. So that is a vital difference, I think, because art builds on top of one another, and that's the thing that's so majestic and beautiful about it. Art is fundamentally about recording something, and capturing also the other thing that's so wonderful about art is, and I think the reason so many, I think almost all of society connects with art, whereas if you see these other things, pick and choose, we pick and choose, right? But we have people who love to collect Harley Davidson motorcycles, but we only have some people, and then there's other people in society who don't know jack shit about Harley Davidson motorcycles. We have some people who like to watch the NHL, the hockey league, but then we have others who have never even seen a game or never even heard of it over in China. You know what I'm saying, or something like that. When you look at art, though, basically every fucking person is interested in it. It's not to say that every person's interested in the same fucking band. No, that's not true. But every person is interested in music. Every person has listened to a song that they've loved that has used, for example, a G note, you know, or a B note or an E note. So you see, music itself actually is across the board, you see. And that's why it is a higher pursuit than all those other pursuits. And we see this even just echoed throughout the arc of history itself. For example, when we look at the evolutionary arc of humankind, we see that in the beginning, what do we do? Well, we just had very basic wants. You know, we wanted to eat some meat, we had to hunt the lion, we went back to the cave, we had sex, you know, we drank some water or some shit, I don't know. And then we got up the next day and we were strong and we did it all again. But we didn't have high pursuits. And then I think the next thing that came after that was that we probably invented some simple games that we played amongst ourselves as the cavemen and, you know, so on, whatever we were. And then eventually we started to make art. And art was what set us apart from every other species 100%. I mean, other species kind of play games with one another. They certainly fight one another, and they certainly wash one another and do all things like that, but they don't make art. So art really has always been the fundamental thing that separates us from all the other species, but a lot of people don't really want to recognize that, right? They sort of, there's really this big idea where everyone wants to kind of connect the shit together and act as though it's all the same. It's really not. There is a superior drive for humankind, and that's what that is. And that's why I think that artists are actually the happiest among us, but also the saddest, because I think that art is, like I say, it's so honest. So it's the one realm of life where people can actually are permitted. When you look at young people, there's a reason that the young people always want to be artists in the beginning. You know, like when I was a teenager, I had so many friends who wanted to be artists, and then as the years went by, they said, I guess I'll never do this. I don't want to be this anymore," and they abandoned it. Whether they were making money for it or not, they just abandoned it. And the reason they abandoned it was because I think it was too honest. They didn't like revealing all those emotions, and they didn't to everybody and putting them out there and so on and so forth because it scared them. Because so much of what modern life and daily life has come to be about is about being completely dishonest and always trying to pretend that your life is better than it really is, and never making the sad songs and never doing this, that, and the other thing, you know? Or you just listen to the sad songs in secret as you're driving your car and it's on the radio. You don't make them yourself. So people have a big problem with all that. And I think that's really interesting. So I just, when I look at our societies of the future, I think games will still be present, for example, but I don't think they'll be as popular as they are now. I think the thing that's going to be very popular is art and intellectual pursuits. I think as our culture gets even more advanced, as I always say, we aren't even anywhere close to being an advanced civilization right now. We are still a type O civilization according to the Kardashev scale. I've done another video on that you can refer back to if you're so interested. I don't know who would be, but someone might. But anyways, so I always say that, and you know, it's just, if you're an aspiring artist out there, just remember, this is a pep talk for you. Those asshole football guys get a bunch of pep talks. So I'm giving some artists a pep talk, and this is it. It's the highest pursuit. Just remember that. Ciao.